Part 2. Chapter 5. The Echoes of the Past. Return to the estate. The bitter, acrid taste of disillusionment, having consumed Konstantin Nikolaevich Volkov's spirit in the gilded, yet ultimately hollow, halls of St. Petersburg, had finally left him utterly broken. The public disgrace, the profound betrayal by Count Fyodor Alexeyevich, and the crushing realization of his own moral compromise. These were not merely events but forces that had shattered the very foundations of his existence. His once boundless ambition, his fervent youthful idealism, his belief in intellect and societal influence as the true measures of wealth, lay in ruins, exposed as a cruel mirage. The city, which had promised him glory and purpose, had delivered only emptiness, a profound spiritual poverty that permeated his very being. The only recourse, a desperate, instinctual flight from the suffocating debris of his shattered ideals, was retreat from Petersburg. His departure was not a planned journey, but a desperate, almost frantic escape. He packed little, merely tossing a few essentials into a small valise. His mind numb, his body moving with an automatic, almost ghostly detachment. The grand avenues, which had once thrilled him with their promise, now seemed to mock him with their indifference. The bustling crowds, once a symphony of urban vitality, now felt like a suffocating throng, each face a potential judge, each whisper a condemnation. He found a carriage, its driver a gruff, unremarkable man, and gave the order, Otradnoy, the name of his ancestral home, once dismissed as provincial and stagnant, now felt like a desperate plea, a last refuge in a world that had betrayed him. The journey itself was a blurred nightmare. The monotonous rhythm of the carriage wheels on the uneven roads, the vast, unchanging landscape of the Russian plain, all passed before his eyes unheeded. His mind consumed by a relentless, tormenting introspection, he saw again, with chilling clarity, the scene of his public humiliation, the cold, accusatory gaze of the inquiry panel, the swift, calculated betrayal of Count Fyodor. He replayed the moment he signed the falsified report, feeling the searing shame burn through him anew, a perpetual brand on his soul. He wrestled with his own complicity, his own ambition that had led him down this treacherous path. He had chosen the path of worldly success, of influence, of intellectual triumph. And it had led him to this precipice of despair. He had left Otradnoy with a youthful arrogance, convinced that true wealth lay in the power of intellect, in the shaping of destiny in the grand theater of the capital. He had scorned the simple, tangible realities of peasant life, the quiet dignity of his father's connection to the land. Now, as the carriage carried him, a broken and disoriented man, away from the shattered dreams of Petersburg, he found himself seeking refuge in the solitude of his ancestral estate. Not with joy, but with a profound, weary resignation. It was a place to hide, to lick his wounds, to simply be, away from the judging eyes of the city that had devoured his spirit. As the carriage finally rumbled down the familiar long drive of Otradnoy, the ancient birch trees lining the path seemed to stand as silent, immutable witnesses to his return. The manor, a sprawling wooden edifice adorned with faded memories, appeared before him, unchanged, yet profoundly alien. The air, crisp and pure, carried the nostalgic scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke, a stark contrast to the acrid atmosphere of Petersburg. He stepped out of the carriage, his legs stiff, his body aching with a profound weariness that transcended physical fatigue. His family met him in the courtyard. His father, Nikolai Petrovich, his face etched with concern, approached with a quiet solemnity. There were no reproaches, no words of accusation, only a deep, weary sigh. "Konstantin," he murmured, his voice gentle, his eyes filled with an unspoken understanding. "You have returned." His mother, Maria Alexeyevna, her delicate frame trembling, rushed forward and embraced him tightly, tears streaming down her face, murmuring incoherent prayers of gratitude and sorrow. Pavel, his elder brother, stood a little apart, his gaze discerning, his usual gruffness softened by a palpable concern. Dmitri, the peasant driver who had taken him to Petersburg, remained by the carriage, his face impassive, yet his eyes held a knowing sadness. Dmitri had returned, yes, but he was a shadow of his former self. His once vibrant intellect now felt like a burden, a tool that had led him astray. His youthful idealism had been brutally crushed, replaced by a profound cynicism that permeated his every thought. He moved with a leaden slowness. His posture slumped, his gaze often distant, fixed on unseen horizons. The physical demands of the journey had left him gaunt, his features sharpened by weeks of sleepless nights and neglected meals. He spent his first days in Otradnoye largely confined to his rooms. Unable to face the light of day, unable to engage in conversation, he grappled with his failures with relentless, agonizing introspection. The public disgrace burned through him, a searing shame that twisted his gut. He replayed the scene of the inquiry again and again, hearing the cold, accusatory voices, seeing the calculating betrayal in Count Fyodor's eyes. He wrestled with the question of his own moral culpability. Had he been merely a victim of circumstance, a naive idealist crushed by a corrupt system? Or had his own ambition, his own yearning for influence, made him a willing accomplice in his own demise, a participant in the very moral compromise he had condemned? The answer, he knew, was a painful, unbearable mixture of both. The stark contrast between his youthful ideals and the harsh realities he has encountered in Petersburg tormented him ceaselessly. He had dreamed of a city of enlightened minds, of righteous governance, of profound intellectual and moral progress. What he had found was a glittering facade, a gilded cage of superficiality, hypocrisy, and pervasive corruption. The intellectuals he had admired proved vain and self-serving. The bureaucrats he had sought to join were cynical and immoral. The society he had yearned to influence was shallow and debased. The wealth he had pursued, intellect, power, influence, had proved to be a mirage, a fleeting illusion that left a bitter taste in his mouth, a profound emptiness in his soul. He had believed in the inherent goodness of institutions, in the perfectibility of man. But Petersburg had shown him a different truth, the insidious power of self-interest, the corrupting nature of power, the profound limitations of human perfectibility, the quiet of the countryside, which he had once scorned as stagnant and provincial, was now all that surrounded him. But it was not the healing balm he desperately needed. Instead, it was initially alienating, its profound stillness amplifying the chaotic roar within his own mind, the rustle of the leaves in the ancient trees, the distant lowing of cattle, the familiar sounds of peasant toil, all seemed to mock his turmoil. Their simple, harmonious rhythm a jarring counterpoint to the discord in his soul. He missed the constant hum of the city, its ceaseless activity, for it had provided a distraction, a background noise that had masked the growing emptiness within him. Here, in the profound silence of Otradnoye, there was no escape from his own thoughts, no refuge from the relentless self-recrimination. He would gaze out the windows of the manor, looking upon the sprawling fields, the dark, familiar forests, and see them not as a source of comfort, but as a vast, indifferent expanse. He remembered his father's words, spoken with such weary prescience: the city promises much, but often delivers only emptiness. Its wealth is often an illusion, its power a fleeting shadow. Remember the earth, Konstantin. It is honest, it hides nothing, its rewards are hard-won, but they are real. He saw now, with a chilling clarity that pierced him to the bone, the profound truth of those words. But the truth, though acknowledged, offered no immediate comfort, only a deeper despair for the path he had so foolishly chosen. The years he had wasted in pursuit of a false promise. His family, though outwardly relieved by his return, struggled to understand the depths of his despair. His mother hovered over him, offering food and whispered prayers, her gentle presence a fragile comfort. His father, with his quiet wisdom, would sit with him in silence, observing him with a gaze that held both sorrow and a deep, unspoken understanding. Pavel, his elder brother, attempted to engage him in discussions about the estate, about the upcoming harvest, about the tangible realities of their shared inheritance. But Konstantin remained largely silent, his responses clipped, his gaze distant. He felt utterly disconnected from them, isolated in his own suffering, unable to articulate the profound moral and spiritual bankruptcy that had consumed him. How could he explain the insidious nature of Petersburg, the depth of his disillusionment, the searing shame of his moral compromise, to souls who had remained untouched by its corrupting embrace? To try would be to pollute their peaceful world, to burden them with horrors they could not comprehend. So, He retreated into his silent suffering, further isolating himself. His days were spent in a state of profound inertia. He neglected his appearance, his clothes unkempt, his hair unruly, his appetite vanished, and his already gaunt frame grew even thinner. Sleep, when it came, was fitful, haunted by the specter of his failures and the ghosts of his lost ideals. He would lie awake for hours in the vast, silent manner, wrestling with his conscience, replaying the moment he signed the falsified report, feeling the searing shame burn through him anew. He was a man utterly broken, his ambition having led him not to triumph, but to a profound, spiritual bankruptcy. The intellectual pursuits that had once defined him now felt like a burden. His philosophical texts, once companions in his fervent quest for truth, lay untouched on his desk, their words cold and sterile. Kant's categorical imperative, once so clear and compelling, now seemed like a cruel mockery of the moral compromises he had made. Rousseau's social contract, a blueprint for an ideal society, felt utterly divorced from the corrupt realities of human nature. The pursuit of pure reason, which he had believed to be the highest calling, now seemed tainted by the inescapable compromises of human ambition. He questioned the very purpose of intellectual endeavor if it could not guide one through the moral labyrinth of real life. If it could not offer true meaning or solace in the face of such profound despair. His mind, once a source of boundless pride, now felt like a cage, trapping him in endless, tormenting loops of self-recrimination and existential doubt. He spent hours walking aimlessly through the autumn-stripped forests, the cold, bare branches overhead mirroring the desolate landscape of his soul. He would sit by the frozen river, watching the dark, cold water flow beneath the ice, feeling its relentless indifference. The vast, empty plains stretched before him, boundless and indifferent, a daunting reflection of the spiritual void that consumed him. He felt utterly alone, isolated in his disillusionment, a solitary figure adrift in a vast, uncaring universe. He remembered his father's words about the earth being honest, its rewards real, and yearned for that honesty, for that tangible reality, but knew not how to find it amidst the ruins of his mind. This was the profound despair that marked Konstantin's crisis of purpose, a spiritual winter that threatened to consume him entirely. The gleaming promise of the city had revealed itself to be a mirage, and its pursuit had led him not to true wealth, but to a vast, encompassing emptiness. The towers of his ambition had crumbled, leaving him amidst the debris of his shattered ideals. A man facing the stark, terrifying truth of his own profound disillusionment. He had sought wealth in the intellect, in power, in influence, and found only bitterness, a profound spiritual poverty. His journey had led him to an abyss. And now, in the solitude of Otrotnoy, amidst the echoes of a past he had once scorned, he found himself utterly lost. A broken man adrift in the shifting sands of disillusionment. His future a bleak, uncharted void. Chapter 6. Intellectual wilderness. Seeking new paths. The autumn winds, carrying the sharp scent of decaying leaves and the chill breath of the approaching winter, swept across the vast, rolling lands of Otrotnoy. For Konstantin Nikolaevich Volkov, these winds seemed to echo the profound desolation within his own soul. A desolation far deeper than any seasonal melancholy. He had returned from Petersburg a man utterly broken, his once boundless ambition shattered, his youthful idealism brutally crushed by the hypocrisy and corruption of the city's glittering facade. The profound crisis of purpose, born of public disgrace and searing moral compromise, had left him adrift, unmoored from all his former anchors. He had sought wealth and intellect, power, and societal influence, and found only bitterness, a vast, echoing emptiness that consumed him. The quiet of the ancestral estate, once alienating in its stark simplicity, now offered a peculiar, if cold, refuge from the judging eyes of the world, but it could not silence the incessant clamor of his own tormented mind. In his desperate search for meaning, for a path out of the spiritual abyss that threatened to swallow him entirely, Konstantin, with an instinct born of lifelong habit, turned once more to the realm that had always been his sanctuary and his strength, the world of books. He retreated to the dusty confines of the family library, its towering shelves laden with leather-bound volumes, their pages crackling with the silent wisdom of centuries. Here, Amidst the musty scent of aging paper and dried ink, he began to immerse himself, not in casual reading, but in a relentless, almost feverish study of philosophical texts. He devoured the works of the ancient Stoics, seeking solace in their doctrines of acceptance and indifference to worldly suffering. He plunged into the intricate arguments of the German idealists, Kant, Fichte, Hegel, hoping to find in their grand systems a logical framework that could explain, and perhaps resolve, the profound contradictions between his ideals and the brutal realities he had encountered. He wrestled with Rousseau's concepts of the social contract and natural man, searching for the elusive blueprint of a just society. He read Voltaire, Diderot, and the French encyclopedists, seeking enlightenment through reason and critique. He devoured the works of Spinoza, seeking a pantheistic God in the vast indifference of nature, and Schopenhauer, whose bleak pessimism offered a perverse comfort in its acknowledgement of human suffering. He spent countless hours thus, locked away in the quiet solitude of the library, the flickering candlelight casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to mock the futility of his quest. His mind, still sharp and incisive, grappled with the complex arguments, dissecting them, analyzing them, attempting to forge from their disparate threads a new, coherent understanding of the universe, of man's place within it, of the meaning of purpose. He would fill countless pages with his sprawling notes, his critiques, his own desperate attempts at constructing a philosophy that could stand against the onslaught of his disillusionment. He debated silently with the long-dead thinkers, their voices echoing in the quiet chamber of his mind, arguing, seeking, perpetually restless. Yet, as the weeks bled into months, and the biting cold of winter firmly settled over Otradnoy, covering the landscape in an unyielding blanket of snow, Konstantin found that the abstract nature of philosophical texts was profoundly unsatisfying in addressing his profound disillusionment. The elegant logical structures of Kant offered no balm for his searing shame. The grand pronouncements of Hegel provided no comfort for the bitter taste of his moral compromise. Rousseau's ideal of the noble savage and the pure social contract seemed utterly detached from the pervasive corruption and hypocrisy he had witnessed in Petersburg. The very beauty of their intellectual construction, their perfect logical coherence, now felt like a cruel mockery of the chaotic, often senseless, realities of human life. These philosophies, born in the minds of men far removed from the physical demands of existence, spoke of universal truths, of abstract principles, but offered no tangible path, no practical guidance for a man whose soul felt utterly broken by the concrete realities of injustice and betrayal. They were intellectual palaces, vast and intricately designed, but they offered no warmth against the biting wind of his despair. No bread for his spiritual hunger. He would emerge from the library, his eyes burning with weariness, his mind churning with unanswerable questions, and gaze out upon the snow-covered fields. The stark, unyielding landscape, though desolate, possessed a raw honesty, a palpable reality that the abstract concepts of his books utterly lacked. The peasants, bundled in their rough clothes, moving through the deep snow with quiet determination as they tended to their meager livestock, seemed to possess a knowledge, a certainty, that eluded him. For all his intellectual brilliance, their lives were simple, often brutal, but they were undeniably real, grounded in the tangible struggle for survival, a reality that now seemed profoundly enviable. It was in these moments of quiet observation, driven by a profound weariness of intellectual abstraction, that Konstantin began to observe the lives of the peasants on his estate with a new, critical eye. Previously, he had regarded them with the detached, paternalistic benevolence of a landowner, their existence a simple, unthinking backdrop to his own grand intellectual pursuits. He had dismissed their lives as narrow, unsophisticated, devoid of the complex thoughts and refined sensibilities that he believed defined true human worth. But now, in the depths of his despair, stripped bare of his own pretensions and crushed by the hollowness of his own worldly achievements, he saw them differently. He watched them from his window, from the manor's distance, as they carried out their daily routines. He saw their ceaseless labor, the men chopping wood, clearing snow from paths, repairing fences, the women tending fires, spinning wool, preparing meager meals. He saw their endurance in the face of the brutal cold, their quiet acceptance of hardship, He saw their simple interactions, their communal support, their unwavering connection to the land that sustained them. There was no pretense in their lives, no elaborate social dance, no intellectual sophistry. There was only the raw, undeniable reality of existence, lived with a profound, uncomplaining diligence. And in this observation, he began to discern a stark contrast to his own complex unhappiness. His was a misery born of intellectual striving, of moral compromise, of shattered ambition, of a relentless internal churn. Their hardships were physical, external: hunger, cold, the threat of illness, the demands of the landowner. Yet, in their faces, even when etched with weariness, he rarely saw the profound spiritual emptiness that consumed him. He saw a quiet strength, a resilient peace that seemed to defy their arduous circumstances. They were not wrestling with the meaning of existence or the ethics of imperial bureaucracy. They were simply living, profoundly, undeniably, deeply rooted in the earth, in their families, in their simple, unwavering faith. Their hands were perpetually busy, their minds perhaps less tormented by abstract doubts, their lives bound to the tangible, physical realities of their world. Konstantin, for all his philosophical knowledge, felt utterly adrift, a disembodied mind cut off from the vital currents of life. He yearned for their apparent simplicity, their unburdened spirit, their profound connection to something real and enduring. He saw the dignity in their toil, a dignity that had been utterly lacking in the morally compromised world of Petersburg bureaucracy. He thought of his father's words: "The earth, it is honest, it hides nothing, its rewards are hard-won, but they are real." And now, he understood them with a chilling, yet profoundly intriguing, clarity. He began to walk among them, not seeking conversation, for he still felt too broken, too alienated to engage. He would wander through the village, observing the peasants as they worked. He watched Fyodor, the grizzled old driver who had taken him to Petersburg, diligently mending a wooden fence, his movements slow and practiced. He saw Maria, the young wife of a neighbor, kneading dough with strong, rhythmic movements, her small children playing at her feet. He saw the old women spinning by the hearth, their fingers nimble, their faces etched with the wisdom of generations. He observed their simple rituals, their communal gatherings, their unshakable adherence to tradition and faith. Their lives, once dismissed as primitive, now seemed imbued with a profound, almost sacred meaning, a tangible reality that eluded his own complex, abstract world. His intellectual pride, which had once been a source of strength, now felt like a heavy burden, a barrier separating him from genuine human connection. He had believed his mind to be his greatest asset, capable of conquering all, but Petersburg had shown him its limitations, its capacity for leading him astray. Now, the peasant, with his unlettered simplicity, seemed to possess a truth, a wisdom of the soul, that all his volumes of philosophy could not provide. The gap between his abstract philosophical knowledge and the palpable, earthy wisdom of the peasants grew larger, more profound, a stark reminder of the limitations of pure intellect. He recalled his father's quiet admonitions, his mother's unspoken fears. They had warned him of the city's emptiness, of the need to stay connected to the earth. He had dismissed their words as the provincialisms of unrefined minds. Now, consumed by the bitterness of his disillusionment, he saw their prescience, their profound, intuitive understanding of true wealth, a wealth not of rubles or power, but of authenticity, of connection, of a life lived in harmony with the natural order. The harsh winter continued, its long, dark nights amplifying his internal torment. He would lie awake in the vast, silent manor, his mind a chaotic whirl of philosophical questions, of searing self-recrimination, of desperate yearning for meaning. He turned to Spinoza, seeking God in the indifference of nature. But the indifference seemed to mock his suffering. He turned to Hegel, seeking meaning in the grand unfolding of history. But history seemed only to record human folly. He found himself utterly lost in this intellectual wilderness, adrift in a sea of abstract thought that offered no anchor, no solace. His body, too, yearned for release from the constant mental torment. He felt a deep, pervasive weariness, a longing for the honest fatigue that came from physical labor, the kind he saw in the peasants' faces at the end of a long day. His own body, weakened by weeks of neglect and intellectual overstimulation, felt alien to him, a cumbersome prison for his restless mind. He envied the peasants their robust health, their simple, uncluttered sleep, their apparent freedom from the kind of existential despair that consumed him. The crisis deepened. Konstantin had always believed that answers lay in intellectual pursuit, that truth could be reasoned out, understood through logical inquiry, but now, his most profound intellectual tools felt utterly useless in addressing the vast, formless emptiness of his soul. His philosophical journey, which had begun with such fervent ambition, had led him to a dead end, a desolate landscape of abstract truths that offered no path to living, no solace for his broken spirit. He was profoundly disillusioned not only with society and ambition, but with the very instrument he had so long relied upon, his own intellect. He found himself wandering more often through the snow-laden paths of the birch forest, seeking refuge in its stark, silent beauty. The ancient trees, their bare branches reaching towards the gray sky, seemed to possess a timeless wisdom, an enduring truth that transcended the fleeting complexities of human thought. He would stand amongst them, feeling the bite of the wind, the cold stillness of the snow, and for fleeting moments, a fragile sense of peace would touch him, a quiet connection to something larger, something more enduring than himself. It was in these moments, amidst the simple, unadorned reality of nature, that the seeds of a new path, a path towards a different kind of wealth, began to stir, imperceptibly, in the depths of his disillusioned soul. He was seeking, desperately, a way to move beyond the intellectual wilderness, to find a truth that resonated not just in the mind, but in the very core of his being, a truth rooted in the tangible, in the simple, in the enduring. Chapter 7. The Earth's Unspoken Wisdom. First Encounters with Labor. The long, unforgiving winter at Otradnoy had at last yielded to the tender, insistent persuasion of spring. The snow, which had for months blanketed the rolling hills in an oppressive silence, now receded in glistening rivulets, revealing patches of dark, moist earth, its scent a primal promise of life. The ancient birches, once stark and skeletal against the gray sky, now shimmered with the nascent green of tiny, delicate leaves, and the air hummed with the ceaseless industry of returning insects. Yet, for Konstantin Nikolaevich Volkov, the spiritual winter within him persisted, a profound desolation that no mere change of season could immediately dispel. He remained a man adrift, having found no anchor in the abstract philosophies that had once been his refuge, his intellect proving utterly useless in addressing the gaping void of his profound disillusionment. He had sought truth in books, in reason, and found only sterility, a landscape of ideas devoid of life. His days continued in a state of aimless inertia, punctuated only by his solitary wanderings through the thawing forests, or by his languid contemplation from the manor windows. The bustling activity of spring planting, which now unfolded in the fields before him, was merely a distant tableau, a world of physical labor utterly disconnected from his internal turmoil. He observed the peasants, their movements precise and rhythmic as they guided their plows through the dark soil, their faces etched with the honest weariness of ceaseless toil. He saw their connection to the earth, a tangible, unwavering bond, and contrasted it with his own disembodied existence, his profound, complex unhappiness born of intellectual striving and shattered ambition. He envied their simplicity, their apparent freedom from the existential despair that consumed him, a yearning he could neither articulate nor deny. It was then, one crisp, sun-drenched morning, as he stood by the edge of the newly plowed field, watching the line of peasants methodically breaking the earth, that an inexplicable impulse seized him. It was a sudden, almost physical urge, a profound weariness of intellectual abstraction, a desperate yearning for something tangible, something real that could anchor him to the present moment. He watched a young peasant, Ivan, guide his plow with a practiced ease, the gleaming share slicing through the rich, dark earth, turning over a fragrant furrow. The sheer physicality of the task, its immediate, visible result, struck Konstantin with a peculiar, almost magnetic force. He felt, for the first time in months, a flicker of something akin to curiosity, a tentative stirring of desire to engage with something utterly divorced from the world of ideas that had betrayed him. Without a word, without conscious deliberation, he found himself walking towards Ivan. The peasant, noticing his approach, paused, his face registering a flicker of surprise at the sight of the master in the field. Away from his books, Konstantin, his voice a little rough with disuse, simply asked, "Ivan, might I try my hand at this?" He gestured vaguely at the plow, feeling an awkwardness that was utterly unfamiliar to him, a man accustomed to effortless command. Ivan, a sturdy, taciturn man, merely grunted, his gaze assessing Konstantin's fine, though slightly disheveled, clothes, his uncalloused hands. He said nothing, but relinquished the handles of the plow, a subtle invitation to the task. Konstantin took the heavy, rough-hewn handles, feeling their solid, unyielding weight, utterly alien to his accustomed touch. The earth beneath his boots felt soft, yielding, yet powerfully resistant. His initial awkwardness was immediate and profound. He strained against the handles, pulling with a force that seemed immense. Yet the plowshare stubbornly refused to cut a straight furrow. It bucked and swayed, digging too deep in one spot, skimming the surface in another. His muscles, accustomed to the gentle exertion of walking through library aisles or writing at a desk, quickly protested. A sharp, unfamiliar ache began to spread through his shoulders, his arms, his back. The sweat, cold at first, then warm and stinging, beaded on his brow, mingling with the dust. He felt utterly clumsy, utterly inept, a man stripped bare of all his intellectual pretensions, reduced to a struggle with the raw, uncompromising reality of the earth. Ivan watched him in silence, his expression unreadable, a faint, almost imperceptible amusement flickering in his eyes. He offered no advice, no mockery, merely allowed Konstantin to grapple with the task, witnessing his struggle with the quiet patience of a man intimately acquainted with the earth's demands. Konstantin, for his part, felt a profound humility, a crushing awareness of his own physical inadequacy, his utter ignorance of this fundamental skill. He had believed his intellect could conquer all. But here, before the simple, honest earth, his mind was useless, his body a source of profound embarrassment. He persisted, driven by an obstinacy born of his own desperation. He pulled and pushed, strained and sweated, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He tried to apply logical principles to the task, to analyze the mechanics, but the earth yielded only to innate knowledge, to practiced intuition, to a dialogue between man and soil that transcended abstract thought. After what felt like an eternity, he managed to complete a short, crooked furrow, his body trembling with exhaustion, his lungs burning. He released the plow handles, his hands raw and aching, and stumbled back, utterly spent. Ivan stepped forward, took the plow, and with a few effortless movements, guided it in a perfectly straight line, the earth turning over with a rhythmic ease that shamed Konstantin. He watched, fascinated, as the peasant's hands, though calloused, moved with a fluidity, a sensitivity, that spoke of a deep, almost spiritual connection to the land. There was an unspoken wisdom in Ivan's movements, a quiet harmony between man and earth that Konstantin, for all his learning, had never encountered. Over the following days, Konstantin, driven by a persistent, unyielding impulse, continued to tentatively engage in physical labor on his estate. Alongside his peasants, he sought out various tasks, driven by an inexplicable hunger for tangible engagement, for the honest weariness of a day spent in physical effort. He helped with clearing brush from the forest's edge, swinging an axe with awkward enthusiasm, his arms quickly aching. He assisted in repairing a crumbling stone wall, lifting heavy rocks, his muscles protesting with each strain. He even tried his hand at digging a new drainage ditch, his back perpetually bent, his hands blistered and raw. His physical discomfort was immense. His body, accustomed to the soft comforts of aristocratic life, rebelled against the unaccustomed strain. His muscles ached perpetually, his joints stiffened, and sleep, when it came, was deep but often restless, punctuated by groans of protest from his exhausted frame. He suffered blisters, cuts, and the pervasive soreness that clung to him like a second skin. He often felt ridiculous, his clumsy efforts a stark contrast to the effortless grace of the peasants around him. He saw their curious glances, their subtle smiles, but they offered no mockery, only a quiet acceptance of his strange, unexpected presence. Yet, amidst this discomfort, something profound began to stir within him. a nascent appreciation for the tangible reality of work and the honest fatigue it brings. Unlike the abstract, endless debates of Petersburg, where ideas floated free of consequence, here, every effort yielded a clear, undeniable result: a felled tree, a mended wall, a newly dug ditch. These were tangible, undeniable achievements, products of his own sweat and strain. The satisfaction was immediate, visceral, utterly devoid of the fleeting, hollow triumph he had found in intellectual victories. It was a satisfaction that resonated not in his mind, but in the depths of his being, a profound, almost spiritual contentment. He began to observe the peasants with a new, deeper fascination. He saw their endurance, their uncomplaining fortitude in the face of relentless toil and harsh conditions. He watched their bodies move with a natural grace, a profound economy of motion, their hands performing complex tasks with an intuitive skill that transcended intellectual understanding. He listened to their quiet conversations, their simple jokes, their unadorned expressions of joy and sorrow. There was a profound honesty in their lives, a connection to the fundamental realities of existence that he, in his pursuit of intellectual abstractions, had utterly lost. Their simplicity, once a source of his disdain, now seemed imbued with a profound wisdom. They did not grapple with existential despair or moral ambiguities. Their purpose was clear: to feed their families, to tend the land, to endure. Their faith, simple and unwavering, seemed to provide an unshakable anchor in a world that, for Konstantin, had proven utterly devoid of meaning. He saw their quiet resilience, their deep-seated acceptance of life's hardships, and a yearning, sharp and undeniable, began to stir within him for that same profound sense of purpose, for that same grounded existence. He would often work alongside them in silence, listening to the rhythmic sounds of their labor, the rhythmic thud of an axe, the creak of a wagon wheel, the low murmur of conversation, and felt a subtle, almost imperceptible shift within his own being. The chaotic roar of his own mind, once consumed by self-recrimination and existential doubt, began to quiet, soothed by the rhythmic simplicity of physical exertion. The biting cold of winter, which had once seemed to mock his despair, now merely provided a tangible sensation, a physical discomfort that anchored him to the present moment, away from the haunting echoes of his past. His family, observing his unusual engagement in manual labor, reacted with a mixture of surprise and cautious hope. His father, Nikolai Petrovich, though initially bewildered by Konstantin's sudden, clumsy efforts, watched him with a discerning eye, a faint, almost imperceptible smile sometimes touching his lips. He saw in his son's struggle a faint glimmer of the truths he had always espoused. Pavel, his elder brother, seemed to view Konstantin's activities with a mixture of amusement and concern, perhaps fearing it was merely another eccentricity of his brilliant, but troubled, sibling. But Konstantin, absorbed in his new, unexpected pursuits, paid little heed to their unspoken judgments. He returned to the manor in the evenings, utterly exhausted, his body aching in 1,000 new ways. But this was a different kind of fatigue. It was not the spiritual exhaustion of Petersburg, the weariness of a soul consumed by disillusionment. This was an honest fatigue, a profound, satisfying weariness that brought with it a deeper, more peaceful sleep than he had known in years. He would fall into his bed, his muscles protesting, but his mind quieted, soothed by the simple truth of a day spent in tangible effort. The philosophical texts in his library, which had recently felt so sterile, now began to take on a new light, seen through the lens of his nascent experiences. He still read them, but his understanding was transformed. He saw the wisdom of Stoicism not merely as an intellectual exercise, but as a practical guide for enduring physical hardship. He saw Rousseau's concept of natural man not as an abstract ideal, but as a reflection of the profound honesty he observed in the lives of the peasants. The truth, he realized, was not only in the grand, abstract systems of philosophy, but in the simple, tangible realities of life, in the dignity of honest toil, in the profound connection between man and the earth. This was the beginning of his transformation, the quiet unfolding of the earth's unspoken wisdom. The soil, which he had once scorned as merely a source of material wealth, now revealed itself to be a profound teacher, a silent conduit to a deeper, more authentic truth. He was learning to listen, not with his intellect alone, but with his hands, with his body, with the very core of his being. The simple, unadorned reality of physical labor, its immediate, clear results, offered a satisfaction that far transcended the fleeting triumphs of his Petersburg ambitions. He was finding a new kind of wealth, not in power or influence, but in the simplicity of honest work, in the profound connection to the enduring earth, in the quiet dignity of a life lived in harmony with the natural order. His journey had led him to an unexpected path, from the intellectual wilderness of his despair to the fertile ground of tangible reality. A tentative step towards reclaiming his purpose, his very soul. Chapter 8. Breaking the ground, a new philosophy of life. The spring, having breathed its tender, green life into the vast lands of Otrotnoy, now yielded to the full, burgeoning warmth of summer. The fields, once dormant beneath their winter shroud, pulsed with the vibrant energy of ripening grain, shimmering green and gold under the benevolent sun. For Konstantin Nikolaevich Volkov, the physical labor he had tentatively embraced in the bitter cold of winter had not been a fleeting, desperate whim, but a profound, almost spiritual necessity. The earth, in its silent, unyielding wisdom, had begun to offer him a clarity that all the grand philosophies of Petersburg, for all their intellectual rigor, had failed to provide. The initial awkwardness and profound physical discomfort of his first encounters with toil had slowly, arduously, given way to a nascent appreciation, a fragile understanding of the tangible realities of work and the honest fatigue it brought. Now, driven not by desperation, but by an emerging, undeniable conviction, Konstantin began to commit more fully to manual labor, seeking in its simple demands not merely a refuge, but a path to genuine understanding, a foundation for a new way of living. He rose each morning before the first pale light of dawn, his body still aching from the previous day's exertions, yet his spirit imbued with a new, quiet purpose. The vast manor, once a refuge for his despair, now felt too large, too empty, its quiet solitude a stark contrast to the profound engagement he found outside. He shed his fine clothes, donning simple, coarse peasant shirts and trousers, their rough fabric a welcome sensation against his skin. His hands, though still bearing the blisters and calluses of a novice, moved with increasing familiarity, eager to engage with the honest realities of the earth. He no longer merely tried his hand at tasks, he immersed himself entirely. Driven by an almost ascetic zeal, a profound hunger for the authentic, his days became a rhythmic tapestry woven from the threads of relentless physical toil. He would walk to the stables, the air crisp and invigorating, filled with the comforting scent of hay and warm horseflesh. He would harness the great draft horses, feeling their immense power, their patient strength. As he led them to the fields, he found a profound, almost meditative, satisfaction in guiding the heavy plow, feeling its share bite deep into the rich, dark soil, turning over fragrant furrows that stretched in long, precise lines across the vast expanse. The rhythmic creak of the harness, the steady breathing of the horses, the subtle resistance of the earth as it yielded its bounty, these simple, elemental sounds and sensations soothed his once turbulent mind, silencing the relentless clamor of his philosophical doubts. He learned the unspoken language of the land, the subtle shifts in the soil's texture, the nuanced demands of different crops, the elusive art of reading the sky for signs of rain or impending storm. He learned to distinguish the healthy shoot from the blighted, the fertile furrow from the barren patch. This knowledge, absorbed not from books but from direct, patient observation and humble effort, felt profoundly real, utterly indisputable. It was the earth's unspoken wisdom, passed down through generations of peasants, a wisdom that transcended the abstract theories of Petersburg, a knowledge rooted in the very essence of existence. He chopped wood in the sprawling forests, his axe rising and falling with a powerful, rhythmic precision, the clean crack of wood splitting, the sharp scent of pine and birch, the profound satisfaction of reducing a towering log into manageable pieces. These were tangible triumphs, immediate and undeniable, utterly devoid of the fleeting, hollow pride he had once found in intellectual victories. His muscles ached, his sweat mingled with the dust of the forest floor, but this was an honest fatigue, a profound, satisfying weariness that brought with it a deeper, more peaceful sleep than he had known in years. He would fall into his bed, his muscles protesting, but his mind quieted, cleansed by the simple truth of a day spent in tangible effort. In productive creation, he worked alongside the peasants, not as a demanding master, but as a fellow laborer, albeit one who was still learning. He observed them, his eyes now open to their profound, unadorned wisdom. He saw their endurance, their uncomplaining fortitude in the face of relentless toil and harsh conditions. He watched their bodies move with a natural grace, a profound economy of motion, their hands performing complex tasks with an intuitive skill that transcended intellectual understanding. He listened to their quiet conversations, their simple jokes, their unadorned expressions of joy and sorrow. There was a profound honesty in their lives, a connection to the fundamental realities of existence that he, in his pursuit of intellectual abstractions, had utterly lost. They did not grapple with existential despair or moral ambiguities. Their purpose was clear. Their lives profoundly engaged with the tangible struggle for survival and sustenance. This immersion in physical labor, this direct engagement with the earth, became the crucible in which Konstantin began to develop a new philosophy of life. It was a philosophy rooted not in the abstract thoughts of long-dead European philosophers, nor in the grand, empty ideals of Petersburg society, but in the direct experience of the earth. He began to understand that true knowledge was not merely the accumulation of facts or the mastery of complex theories, but a profound, intuitive understanding of the world gained through direct engagement, through the physical acts of creation and sustenance. The truth, he realized, was not to be found in syllogisms and debates, but in the honest sweat of one's brow, in the subtle scent of newly turned soil, in the rhythmic beat of a working heart. His new philosophy was grounded in self-sufficiency. He had once believed that wealth lay in the accumulation of material possessions and in the power derived from societal influence. But now, he saw that true wealth lay not in what one acquired, but in what one produced with one's own hands, in the ability to sustain oneself through honest labor, independent of the fickle currents of society or the corrupting influence of power. He learned the value of skilled craftsmanship, the dignity of simple tools, the profound satisfaction of knowing that his food, his shelter, his very existence, were the direct result of his own effort. This self-reliance brought a profound sense of freedom, a liberation from the endless desires and dependencies that had plagued his aristocratic existence. And central to this new philosophy was the profound dignity of honest toil. He had once scorned manual labor as a mark of servitude, an occupation beneath his intellectual station, but now, he saw it as the highest form of human endeavor, a direct participation in the act of creation itself. There was a profound honesty in physical work, a directness that stripped away all pretense, all hypocrisy. The earth demanded truth, it yielded only to honest effort. In the relentless rhythm of the plow, in the patient nurturing of the seed, in the tireless harvesting of the grain, he found a profound, undeniable beauty, a spiritual resonance that far transcended the sterile debates of philosophical salons. He understood that true nobility lay not in inherited titles or accumulated riches, but in the integrity of one's labor, in the unwavering connection to the source of all life. His intellectual pride, which had once been a source of such torment, now slowly began to yield to a quiet humility. He still read his philosophical texts, but his understanding was transformed. He saw the wisdom of Stoicism not merely as an intellectual exercise, but as a practical guide for enduring physical hardship. He saw Rousseau's concept of natural man not as an abstract ideal, but as a reflection of the profound honesty he observed in the lives of the peasants. His mind, once so focused on abstract concepts, now yearned for practical application, for a philosophy that could be lived, not merely debated. His family, observing his increasing commitment to manual labor, reacted with a mixture of surprise, cautious hope, and quiet understanding. His father, Nikolai Petrovich, rarely spoke directly of Konstantin's transformation, but his discerning gaze often lingered on his son, a faint, almost imperceptible smile sometimes touching his lips. He saw in Konstantin's calloused hands, in his deepening connection to the land, a profound vindication of his own lifelong wisdom. He would sometimes join Konstantin in the fields, working silently beside him, their shared labor a profound, unspoken communion between father and son. a mutual acknowledgement of the earth's enduring truths. Pavel, his elder brother, still viewed Konstantin's newfound pursuits with a mixture of bewilderment and a lingering skepticism. Perhaps fearing it was merely another passing eccentricity of his brilliant, but troubled, sibling. He worried about the estate's finances, about Konstantin's lack of interest in proper, aristocratic management. Yet, even Pavel could not deny the tangible results of Konstantin's tireless efforts. The healthier crops, the mended fences, the improved efficiency of the farm. Konstantin himself remained largely silent about his internal transformation, for the truths he was discovering were too profound, too deeply personal, for easy articulation. He was learning to listen, not with his intellect alone, but with his hands, with his body, with the very core of his being. The simple, unadorned reality of physical labor, its immediate, clear results, offered a satisfaction that far transcended the fleeting triumphs of his Petersburg ambitions. He was finding a new kind of wealth, not in power or influence, but in the simplicity of honest work, in the profound connection to the enduring earth, in the quiet dignity of a life lived in harmony with the natural order. His journey had led him to an unexpected path, from the intellectual wilderness of his despair to the fertile ground of tangible reality. A profound step towards reclaiming his purpose, his very soul, as summer deepened, bringing with it the intense heat and the promise of a bountiful harvest. Konstantin found himself immersed in the ceaseless rhythm of the farm, his spirit attuned to the subtle demands of the ripening crops. He worked alongside the peasants, their shared sweat, their communal effort, forging a new kind of connection between them. He no longer felt alienated, but profoundly part of something larger, something real and enduring. The sun beat down on his back, the earth pulsed with life beneath his feet, and in that tangible reality, he found a profound clarity, a sense of peace that had always eluded him in the abstract world of ideas. His mind, once consumed by philosophical questions, now found its answers in the quiet wisdom of the soil, in the simple, undeniable truths of honest toil. He saw God not as a distant, abstract concept, but in the miracle of germination, in the abundance of the harvest, in the enduring strength of the earth itself. His faith, once shattered, was slowly, painstakingly, being reassembled, piece by painful piece, into a new, more profound conviction, one born not of dogma, but of direct experience, of unwavering connection to the simple, divine order of creation. The fields of Otradnoy, which he had once dismissed as a mere backdrop to his ambitious life, now revealed themselves as the true source of his inheritance, a legacy not of rubles or titles, but of a profound, enduring philosophy of life. He was breaking the ground, not just of his fields, but of his own soul, cultivating a new path towards true wealth, found in the simplicity of the earth, in the dignity of honest labor, and in the profound, unwavering connection to the very source of life. His journey had led him through disillusionment and despair, but it was leading him, at last, to a profound, unexpected satisfaction, a quiet triumph of the spirit. Part 2 of the story ends here. Thank you and goodbye. See you again in the next part.